Hi guys, it's Anna. Welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to make this adorable little, I'm still figuring out what the name should be, but mesh, grid, those are like the two common keywords on my channel, I feel like. I don't know, but it's this like really pretty kind of mesh shell tank top. Maybe shell is a good word. But it's actually very simple. You're just making one panel and then recreating it for the back panel. And it's like very straight up and down until you get to here where you're doing some decreases, but overall super beginner friendly. So definitely would recommend this if you're not super advanced with your crochet work yet. You obviously should know like basic stitches and basics of crochet. I'm not like walking you through that for the first time, but definitely acceptable for like one of your first projects. But let's just get into the video. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already so you don't miss more tutorials like this. I've been on a roll. This is like my third week in a row posting, so stay tuned for more and leave any comments of video suggestions or questions or comments or just say hi. But let's just get into it. Alright, so for yarn, I'm going to be using the Hobbii Friends Cotton 8x4 yarn. This is in the color 4, and here is the yarn information. I'm going to be using a 2.5mm hook with this. You'll need a darning needle and then some scissors. And then a measuring tape is optional, but I'm going to be giving you my measurements and how many stitches I do, so you can kind of use that to gauge how to make yours. To start, we're going to make a slip knot, so just make a loop and then pick up this yarn through the loop and pull, and then insert your hook and tighten down. We're going to be making foundation double crochets here. If you don't want to do this, you can just chain the amount that I end up telling you to make and then double crochet into this, but I find that this is a lot easier and gives you a little bit better of an idea of the proper width that you're going to get, because sometimes when you chain a little tighter, and then once you crochet into it, it gets too big. So this is my favorite way for doing a foundation row so that you don't have to chain and then crochet into those chains. This just works up a lot faster for me. So I will put a video in the description showing in more depth how to do this, but I'm going to show you as well, but that's just kind of some extra help. So what you're going to do is you're going to chain 2. So there's 1, 2, and then we're doing foundation double crochets here. So you're going to wrap the yarn around the hook just like you'd make a normal double crochet, and then you're going to go into this first chain that we made and pick up both of the loops of the chain like that. You're going to pull up a loop, so you have 3 loops on your hook, and then I like to kind of loosen that first loop so that's not too tight. And this first loop here is going to act as our chain. So, you know, instead of making a foundation chain and then crocheting into it, we're just doing the chain right here. So loosen that a little bit, yarn over and pull through just that first loop. So that's our chain. That's the bottom of our stitch basically. And now we're going to make the double crochet. So then you're going to wrap around the hook and you're going to pull through those first 2 loops on the hook like that, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. So that makes our first foundation double crochet right here. And then to make our next one, you're going to do the same thing. So wrap the yarn around the hook, and then you're going to go into the bottom of this foundation double crochet we just made and go into there, and you want to make sure you're picking up both loops like that. See, I didn't even fully get that. There we go. So both loops of the bottom of that foundation double crochet are on the hook. Yarn over, pull up a loop and kind of loosen that, and that's going to be our first chain, or not our first chain, but our chain of this foundation double crochet. And then yarn over, pull through just that loop, so that makes our chain, and then yarn over, pull through the first 2 on the hook, and then yarn over, pull through the remaining 2. So we've made 2 foundation double crochets, and you can just tell by looking at the top. This is our first chain right here, so we're not counting this little V right here. We're just counting these 2 foundation double crochets. So we've done 2 so far, and you can kind of just look and tell. And now we're just going to keep doing this. So we are making the first panel of our top, and we're going to be making 2 panels. So That's my third one there. This is going to be the width of your top. And the number of foundation double crochets you do here needs to be a multiple of 6 and then add 4. So for reference, my bust measurement is about 33 inches all around. And I am gonna do 76 foundation double crochets for this front panel. So my multiple of 6 would be 72, and then I add 4 to that. And so I end up with 76. And here is another top that I made just to kind of show you and explain what we're doing. So we're making, as you can see, this is 2 panels just connected. So we're making one of the panels. So it's just gonna be this width here. So like I said, my bust measurement is 33 inches roughly. And I am making this front panel width roughly 14 3/4 inches. So if you're trying to find what width you should make yours, a little kind of formula you can go by is take your bust measurement, which again is the widest part of your chest all the way around, and multiply that by 0.45. And that roughly gives you the same kind of ratio that I got. So back to the actual project, like I said, I am doing 76 stitches. So 72 is the multiple of 6 plus 4. Right now we have 3, so I'm just gonna keep doing these foundation double crochets. That's my 4th, my 5th, and I'm just gonna keep doing this until I have the proper number. Make sure you're counting because it's super important that you get the multiple of 6 exactly. And then add that 4 or it's not gonna work out. So it's super important you count multiple times if you need to. Just be super sure that you have it correct and just use that formula that I gave you to come up with your proper measurement. So I'm gonna do that and then I'll come back. All right, I have my 76 double crochets here. And this is going to represent our row 1. And obviously this was foundation double crochets, but for the rest of the top, we're just gonna be doing regular double crochets, but it's the same thing. It's just a solid row of double crochets. So that was row 1. Again, just make sure you count this and it's correct. You'll find out pretty soon if you got your numbers mixed up, but you want a multiple of 6 plus 4, so double check to make sure you got it correct. And if you're kind of in between numbers and you're struggling with how long to make it, just keep in mind that you would always rather it be a little bit too big rather than a little bit too small, because if it's too small, then it might be uncomfortable and you might not even be able to get it on properly. So I would err on the side of slightly too big if you have to. But once you're good with that, then we are gonna chain 1 at the end of this row and turn our work. So now we're starting row 2. And for all of our rows, the turning chains are not going to count as a stitch. So we're always going to go into the very first stitch of the row. So that's going to be that first stitch right there, right under or directly to the left of this chain right here. And what we're going to be doing on this row is single crochets, but making little chain 2 gaps between clusters of single crochets. So I'll show you what we're doing. We're going to do a single crochet into that very first stitch. So the final double crochet that we made right here. That's our first single crochet in our first stitch. And then we're going to be making 3 more for a total of 4 next to each other. So then in this next stitch, we're making our second single crochet. That's 2. This next one is our 3rd, 3, and then this last one is our 4th. So we have 4 single crochets all next to each other there. And then we are gonna chain 2. That's 2, and then we're gonna skip 2 stitches. So we're gonna skip this one, and then we're gonna go into this 3rd one from the hook with a single crochet. And then we're gonna do 3 more for, again, a total of 4. So that is literally just the repeat for this stitch. So that's my 2nd one, 3rd one, 4th one. And then we're gonna chain 2, skip 2 stitches, and go into the 3rd from our last single crochet. So you should see these kind of gaps. It's kind of hard to see, but there's another gap right there. But yeah, that's our first one. Then we're gonna do 3 more for a total of 4. So that is just the pattern. This is my 4th. We're gonna chain 2, skip 2 and go into the 3rd, and so on. So you're just going to do this until the end of the row, and you should end with 4 single crochets. All right, I'm nearing the end. I just did my last chain 2 after doing 4 single crochets, and if you look, we're going to skip this one, and then we only have 4 more of these double crochets to go into, and that's how you know you did it correctly. So we're skipping these 2, go into this one. This is my first of 4. That's 1, 2, 3, and then our last one should be in this final double crochet. So remember, this is just our starting chain, so we're ignoring that. This is our first actual foundation double crochet, if you can see that. And you should just end up with 4. So it's symmetrical. We started with 4 and we're ending with 4. And now we're going to chain 3 and turn. So now for row 3, we're going to be doing double crochets in kind of a shell cluster pattern. So to start, we are going to put a double crochet right into that very first stitch, because again, remember, these chains are not counting as a stitch. So we're going to make a double crochet by wrapping the yarn and go into that first stitch, so that final single crochet we made on our last row. So right here, go into there with a double crochet like that, and then we're going to chain 2. And then we're going to make 4 double crochets into this chain 2 gap that we made on our single crochet row, our previous row. We're going to make 4 double crochets directly into that gap. So go into the gap there, make our first one. That's 1. Go back into the gap. That's 2. Back into the gap for 3, and then back into the gap for 4. So we just made a first double crochet into that first stitch, chain 2, and then 4 double crochets into this chain 2 space. Then you're gonna chain 2 again, and then we're gonna be repeating this. So now go to the next gap. It's you kind of have to like pull it apart to find it, but we chain 2, and now we're going 4 double crochets again in this next gap. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we're going to chain 2 and repeat this all the way down. So our next gap is right here, and we're just doing 4 in here, and then once we do this 4, chain 2, do 4 in here, chain 2, do 4 in the next one, and so on until the end. I'm at the end of my row. I just did my last cluster of 4, chained 2, and then since we're making this symmetrical, remember we just started with 1 double crochet at the beginning. We did our chain 2, and then we're just going to make a double crochet into that final stitch. So we're skipping these 3 and then going into that final stitch with a double crochet. Like that, and then you're going to chain 1 and turn. And now for this row, we're going back to single crochets. So you can kind of get that pattern that we're going to be doing a row that has some variation of single crochets, and then a row of double crochets and single crochets and double crochets, and that just kind of repeats the whole way. So if you just did a double crochet row, you know you're doing one of our 2 single crochet rows. So for this one, it's a little bit different than our other single crochet row because we're not doing any of these chain gaps, but we're going to start with a single crochet in that first stitch just like normal. So that's our first single crochet, and then for every gap that you see here, you're going to be putting 2 single crochets inside of the gap. So 1 right there, and then 2, and then you're going to make a single crochet in every of these 4 double crochets of this cluster. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then, like I said, every gap gets 2. So there's 1 inside the gap and then 2 inside the gap. And then just continue this down. So we're going to do 4, 1 in each double crochet, 2 in the gaps, 4, 1 in each double crochet, and then 2 in the gaps. So continue that down all the way across. Okay guys, this is voiceover Anna from the future. So unfortunately my camera was plotting against me and did not film the ending of this row and then the start of the next row. So I'm just going to explain it here. It's very simple. So to end off row 4, you're just going to continue that pattern of doing a single crochet in each of the 4 double crochets, and then for every chain 2 space you're doing 2 single crochets in there. Do that all the way until the end, and once you reach the end, at that final chain 2 space, you're going to do 2 single crochets in there, and then just in that last double crochet from the previous row, you're just doing 1 single crochet. So that'll make it symmetrical from the beginning, and then you're going to chain 3, turn, and then at this point we're just repeating our row 1. And so like I said, obviously our row 1 started with foundation double crochets, but now we're just doing regular double crochets. So in that very first stitch, that first single crochet from our previous row, you're going to make a double crochet, and then you're going to double crochet into all of the remaining stitches on the row. You're not doing any chain spaces or anything like that. You're just repeating our row 1, which is just double crochets all the way across. So you're just going to make double crochets into every single stitch, including that final single crochet from the previous row. And your number of double crochets here should match the initial number of foundation double crochets we made at the beginning. So for me, that was 76. I had 76 double crochets here. So just wanted to let you know, like, we're jumping a little bit. You'll see me finishing off the end of this double crochet row, but wanted to fill you in because unfortunately we lost a little footage. We are at the end of the row now, and I just have 1 more double crochet into that final single crochet of the previous row. So I'm just doing my last double crochet, and then we're going to chain 1 and turn. And now we're literally just repeating this same pattern. So like I said, this was just our row 1 that we did down here. So the next row is going to be row 2, which is where I'm going to do 4 single crochets here, starting in this first stitch. Like always, do 4 single crochets and then chain 2, skip 2, then 4 single crochets, and just do that to the end of the row, and just go back and watch these if you need a reminder on what to do for each row. But that's literally what you're going to keep doing for a good bit of the rest of this top. So it's a super simple row repeat, which is really nice. Yeah, so we just did row 1, and you're going to keep doing rows 1 through 4 all the way until you get to the length that you want. So for reference, we are basically like right here. We've just started working from the bottom of this front panel. So you're going to continue doing this until you get to about the armpit area, and then I'll show you how to do these decreases and such. But yeah, right now we're just doing no decreases, nothing like that, just a rectangle up until your armpit level. So you can make this as cropped or as long as you want. For reference, I ended up doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of the like shell rows. That's an easy way to count since it's these holes. So I ended up doing about 10 for this top. We'll see how many I end up doing for this one, but you are just going to keep repeating all these rows until you get to that armpit area, and until you have a length that you like. So do that. I'm going to do that, and then I will get back to you. All right, so I've done my rows to the length that I want. So again, remember, this is the bottom of the top, and then this is up to the armpit. So you can kind of figure out how long you want that. If you have like an existing shirt that is a good length that you can kind of use to measure bottom to armpit / armhole, then you can do that. But if not, then you can kind of just eyeball it. But for me, I ended up doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 rows of the cluster shell stitch. That's just the best way to count because you can just count the holes. And for this white top, I only did 10. I just wanted to make this one a little bit longer, but again, do however long you'd like it to be. If you're curious, mine is about 11 inches tall. So now that we're at a good spot there, it's time to do these decreases so we can kind of make this taper in to have our armhole, because if you look at like any tank tops that you have that are not crocheted, this is kind of the general makeup of that garment. And so we're going to be replicating that with crochet, and we're going to be doing decreases. So I'm going to be showing you how to do a decrease on the row after our row 3. So row 3 is this like shell cluster stitch, and we're going to be doing it in the row after, which is the single crochet row, where you're doing like 2 single crochets in the gaps and then single crochets all across. So that is where we're going to be making our decreases. If you're doing your decreases a little bit different, let's say you want to do it on a different row, you can do that. You just kind of are going to have to pay attention to how many you're decreasing on each row, so that when you make it back to like a shell row or the single crochet row where we're skipping 2, it all works. Because if you decrease too much or too little and not the correct amount, then things are going to get wonky and you're not going to have that multiple of 6 plus 4. So that's kind of what you want to do, but I'm going to show you exactly how you can follow it for my way. And if you follow this exactly, then you're going to be totally good. So I would just recommend doing that. But if maybe your size requires that you do a little bit different, you can do that. Just write down every single thing that you do, so that A, you can replicate it on, this other side and that it's symmetrical, but B, so that you can replicate this on the other panel once we make our back panel. But all of that being said, I'm going to show you how to do it. So you're going to want to make your final row being this shell row 3. And I just chained 1 after that, just like normal. And now we're going to be making our first set of decreases. So for this row, we're going to be decreasing by 2 on each side. So total, we're subtracting 4 stitches across the whole row. And it's going to be at the beginning and at the end. So we're going to do 2 at the beginning, and the way that we're going to decrease is very simple. Normally, we'd obviously go into this first stitch right there with a single crochet and then 2 in here. And so we're subtracting 2, so we're going to skip the first 2. So we're going to skip going in there, and we're going to skip one of these single crochets into this gap, and we're just going to make 1 single crochet into this gap. So like that, we have 1 single crochet there, and we've essentially subtracted 2 by skipping one of these holes or one of these stitches into this hole and then the first single crochet of the row. So that's kind of what we're doing as our beginning. And so we're only doing that 1 in there, and then we're going to do our next one into this cluster. So we've only done 2 single crochets so far, and we're already at this first of the 4 double crochets of that cluster, if that makes sense. And then at this point, we're doing everything like normal. So that was our decrease. We decreased by 2 there. And now we're just going to do our regular single crochet into every other stitch. And once you get to these gaps, you're doing 2 single crochets in the gaps, just like normal. The only thing we're changing is that beginning, and then we're also going to decrease by 2 at the end. So just 1 single crochet in every single stitch, and then once you get to this chain space, you're doing 2 single crochets in there, just like normal. So I'm going to do this all the way across. I'm nearing the end, so I just did my last single crochet in this last double crochet from the row before. And so normally, if this wasn't a decrease row, we would do 2 single crochets in here and then 1 single crochet in that final double crochet there. Again, we always ignore this chain as a stitch. So I would normally have 3 more stitches remaining, but since we're decreasing by 2, I only have 1 remaining. So just like we did in the beginning where we only had 1 single crochet in this gap, we're just going to do 1 single crochet into that gap, and then we're done. So we're skipping the last 2 as well. So we have decreased by 4 now. You're going to chain 3 like normal and turn. And now is our second decrease row. So this is just going to be our regular like double crochet solid row, but we are going to be decreasing. And last time we decreased by 2 on each side, but this time and for the rest of our decrease rows, we're only going to be decreasing by 1 on each side. So 2 per row as opposed to the 4 that we just decreased on our last row. So all of the remaining decrease rows we're doing are just going to be subtracting by 1 on each side. So to do that, it's going to be the same concept as our previous row where we're just skipping that first stitch. So normally we would make a double crochet in this first spot right there, that last single crochet from the last row, but we're going to be skipping that and then working into this one. So we just decreased, oops, messed that up. We just decreased by 1 double crochet, 1 stitch. So now for the rest of this row, we're just doing our regular double crochets all the way across, and then you probably guessed that at the end we're going to do the same thing where we decrease by 1, because you just want to make sure that everything is symmetrical, and whatever you do when you're starting, you do when you're ending the row. So just double crochet all the way across, and then we will come back. And then I'm at the end. I just made my last double crochet. So notice that normally we would be going into this final single crochet there, but since this is a decrease row and we're decreasing by 1, we are not going to go into this last single crochet, and that's going to be our decrease. So now we have decreased by 1 on each side, so 2 more decreases total. And then we're going to chain 1, turn, and this row is going to be our, 4 single crochet, chain 2, skip 2, 4 single crochet row, but this one's going to be a little bit different. It's a little bit less intuitive of a decrease, so make sure you're paying attention to this one. So what we're going to do is we are decreasing by 1 on each side, but we're not going to be doing 4 single crochets at the beginning. So we are decreasing, so we're skipping this first stitch there, and we're going to make it in here instead of here. So make our first single crochet 1 stitch over to decrease, and now we're just going to be doing 3 single crochets just for this starting point. So that's 1, 2, 3. Remember, normally we do 4, but we're just doing 3. And then you're going to chain 2, skip 2, go into the 3rd from the hook, and now we're just doing our regular 4 single crochets, chain 2, skip 2. So we're only doing that 3 single crochets for the first part and then at the end, because we're keeping it symmetrical, you get it. But for all of these in between, we're doing our regular 4 single crochets and then chain 2, skip 2. So just do this all the way. I've reached the end now, and I did my set of 4, chain 2, and now I'm going to skip 2, and you'll see that I do 1, 2, but we're only doing 3. So once you do your 3, you should notice that you have 1 stitch remaining, and we do right there. And remember, we're skipping that because we're doing a decrease on this side, just like we did at the beginning. So I just have 3 single crochets there, and then you're going to chain 3 and turn. And now this one again is a little bit maybe counterintuitive, or just not quite as intuitive of a decrease. So we are going to be decreasing, if you could have guessed. But the way that we're doing it is, so we just chained our 3, and instead of making another stitch, we are literally just going to chain 2 more. So we're skipping making that first double crochet and just going straight to the chain 2, and then we're going to make our cluster of 4 double crochets in this first gap, just like normal. And then the rest of this is going to be normal until we get to the end. So we just skipped making that first double crochet. So I made my 4th, and then chain 2, and you know the drill, go into the next gap, make 4, chain 2, skip all the way down until the end when I'll meet you. I'm at the end, and we are gonna do our next decrease, and this is a little bit different than how we started, but you're gonna do your last cluster, chain 2 like normal, but instead, so if you remember, we did 3 single crochets here this last row instead of 4. So we are gonna, instead of going into this first single crochet of the 3 there, we're actually gonna go into this second from the last one there, if that makes sense. So this middle one here instead of this last one. We're gonna go into there with a double crochet. So not going into that final 3rd single crochet of the 3, going into the second / middle one. And then you're going to chain 1 and turn. And now we are going to be decreasing by 1 again, but it is going to be a little bit different. Last time, if you remember, with our single crochet row that followed the shell stitch, we decreased by 2 on each side. And so we counted this as the first stitch, and then one of these as the second stitch, so we only did 1 single crochet in this row. And we're actually going to be doing the same thing, where we're just doing 1 single crochet into this hole, but we're only decreasing by 1 on this side, so it's a little confusing. But the way we ended last row, this double crochet isn't even counting as a stitch, so we're not even counting this as a stitch that we're skipping. we're literally ignoring it because, as you can see, we didn't even do a double crochet on this side. This was just my way of like fastening down. So we're not even like skipping this stitch. We're just pretending it doesn't exist. So we're really only skipping the first single crochet of this gap space, and we're just gonna do one single crochet in the gap space. Hopefully that makes sense, but if it doesn't, just do what I'm doing. One single crochet there, and then you know the drill. The rest of the row, except for the end, we're just gonna do what we normally do. So one in every single stitch, and then when you get to these gaps, you're doing two, just like normal. We're only changing stuff up at the beginning and the end. And then I'm almost at the end here. I'm doing my last single crochet in that last double crochet from the previous row. And then just like the beginning, we're only gonna do one single crochet into this last gap space to decrease by one. Because again, there's not a stitch here that we're skipping, if that makes any sense. And then you're gonna chain 3 and turn. This is going to be our last decrease row. So we are gonna decrease just kind of like normal now in a way that is intuitive again. So we're gonna skip this first stitch here, this first single crochet that we would normally make a double crochet into, and we're just gonna go into this one. So just decreasing like one, just like we did on our other decrease row. That was this plain double crochet row. And now for the rest of this, you're just doing one double crochet into every single crochet, and then I bet you can guess how we're gonna decrease at the end, but I will show you how we're doing that. I'm about at the end here. Just gonna do my final ones. And so as you can see, I just have one more single crochet here, if you can see that. This is my last single crochet, and we're decreasing, so I'm just not gonna go in there. So I'm skipping that single crochet that we did over this chain space. And that was our final decrease. So now you're gonna chain 1 and turn. And so we are back to our single crochet gap row that we do, where we do 4 single crochets and then a chain 2 gap. And I'm not doing any more decreases because this, works for me. And so I'm just going to now do that regular row here. And so if everything was done correctly, then this will all work out with our regular row. So I am going to go in that very first stitch because we're not decreasing. So go into that first stitch there with single crochet, and we're doing 4 again because this is just a regular row now. So that's 4, and then chain 2, miss 2 stitches, and then 4 more single crochets. And we're just doing this all the way down, just like we did all the way down here for the rest of the top. And now I'm at the end. I just did 2 single crochets, and I'm gonna do a total of 4. So 3, and then we are going into that last stitch there for our 4th. And we have 4 at the end there, and we had 4 at the beginning. And if you followed all of the decrease instructions and counted everything correctly, then that should be the case. You shouldn't have any wonky or extra or missing stitches. And then we're gonna chain 3 and turn. And just to show you what we're doing here, so this is where we did our decreases all the way up to here. And now we're working straight up. So I am gonna do 3 more rows of the shell row. So the next row we're doing is the shell row. So I'm gonna do that up to 3 more rows of that shell row, repeating all of the other stitches just like normal. Like we did down here, no decreases, nothing, just working straight directly up, back and forth this whole way. And then I'll show you how to do the arm or neck. I don't know, what is this? I don't know, you can see what I'm talking about. I don't know how to explain this, but I'll show you how to do that. But for now, we're just working this part where it's just back and forth, just kind of a smaller area now since we did our decreases, but you're not gonna be decreasing anymore. So just do this shell row like normal, 4 shells or 4 double crochets into each hole, and then repeat all of your regular stitches from there until you have the correct height for you. So I'm gonna do that and then I will be back. All right, so this is where I am. Also, sorry if the lighting's gross. It's dark outside, so we're working with what we have. But this is what I ended up doing. So I think the easiest way to explain like how much I ended up doing is this is where we first did our decrease. So we started right after this this hole, this shell stitch. So I've done 1, 2, 3, 4 after that. And the last row I did is just our plain double crochet row. And yeah, it really doesn't matter. So if you want to do more or less, you can do that. Just kind of keep in mind where this is on the top. So we are right up here at the neckline, and then we're gonna add this little bit here to add on to the strap, I guess. Yeah, so that's what I did for mine, but feel free again if you have some sort of tank top or top that you can use as a reference that kind of fits how you want this to fit. You can kind of just lay this on top and see if you want to do less or more. And you can look at how it fits on me, like if you want the neck to be higher or lower, just kind of do it according to what you're wanting. But this is what I'm happy with. So I'm going to continue. So I just did my double crochet row, and the next step is going to be chain 1 and turn. And so now we're going to do our regular rows. We're not decreasing or increasing or anything. We're just going to stop prematurely. We're not going to go down the whole length of the top. And if you look at my strap, I ended up doing 3 holes worth for our shell row, for lack of a better term. But again, you can make this wider if you want a wider strap. You can go in more, but this is, again, just what I wanted. So what we're gonna do is, this row is our regular single crochet, chain 2 row. So we're gonna do that just like normal. Go into that first stitch with a single crochet. And again, if you were doing this on a different row, you didn't end on the same row as me, that's fine. You're just gonna stop wherever you want and just end on some sort of stopping point. But yeah, I just did 2 single crochets, 3, 4, chain 2, skip 2, and this is where I'm gonna stop. So just make sure you're keeping it symmetrical. So like I started with my 4 single crochets like normal, did my chain 2 space, 4, chain 2 space, and then ended on 4. So you wouldn't obviously want to end on like a chain 2 space or something. You want to make sure it's symmetrical. So that's what I'm doing for my width. And then you're gonna chain 3 now, because we're stopping here. And now we're just gonna go back and forth across this length now, just as if it's the whole top. But obviously it's much less wide. So we're just gonna do our shell stitch now. So start in that first stitch, just like normal. Chain 2, go into this gap with 4 doubles. Chain 2, go into the next gap, and then chain 2, and then 1 final double crochet at that last stitch. And then you're gonna chain 1 and turn. So we're just going back and forth, as you can see, to make this strap. And keep in mind, again, this isn't gonna be the whole strap. We're gonna be doing the same thing on the back. So this just needs to be the height to meet like half of your strap length, because we'll have the other one on the back and they'll meet at the top, if that makes sense. But yeah, now this stitch, it's just our row where we're doing a single crochet in every stitch, and then our 2 single crochets in the gap. And then you're gonna chain 3. And you kind of get, I think, the pattern now. We're literally just doing our regular stitch repeat, or row repeat, until we have a height that we want. So again, you can use a tank top that you have to use as a reference. This is where I went to on mine. So we started right here, obviously, with this row being our first row of the strap. So I ended up doing 2 holes. So I just did my first. So once I get to my second, that is my last row. And then you can see on the other side, this isn't a single crochet row. This is just where I join them. So I end on this shell row. So I'm just gonna go to there and then get back to you. All right, so I just ended up with my last stitch of this shell row, and that's gonna be the final stitch of this strap for this side of the top. And next step is just going to be chain 1, and then we are cutting our yarn, and I recommend leaving a decently long tail so that we have enough to weave in, but then you're just gonna pull your yarn through and tighten that down so it's secure. We'll weave everything in at the end. And now we are gonna work on this side. So we're gonna attach our yarn into this very corner. So what you're gonna wanna do is go into the top of this last double crochet here. So not the chains, but the top of the stitch right there. Make a slip knot and then put that on your hook and then tighten it down and pull that through to attach our yarn. And then you're gonna chain 1. And now we are gonna be doing the same thing, just mirrored. So remember, this stitch is now just the 4 single crochet, chain 2 stitch. So go into that first stitch, the one we just attached to, make a single crochet and then make 3 more. Now chain 2, skip 2, go into the next one. And then we're gonna do chain 2, skip 2, and then 1 more set of 4, so that it's the exact same thing that we did on the other side. So just do whatever you did on the other side of the top. If you did something different than me, just make sure you are mirroring that perfectly. Then we're gonna do the exact same thing. So I'm not gonna show you again because it's literally the exact same thing, but follow the same row repeats up to the same height. So again, I'm gonna be stopping at this second shell row. All right, so I just did my last stitch / row of this side and it matches up with this one. Make sure you didn't like mess up and do an extra one or go an extra row or anything. Make sure they're even and symmetrical. And then I am going to chain 1 and do the same thing and detach my yarn and just tighten that down. So now we have made our first panel and this is what it looks like. So our next step is going to be literally just repeating this again for the back panel. So you're gonna follow the exact instructions I just gave. You don't need to change anything. Just make sure you, obviously if you changed things from my instructions, make sure you're following whatever you did and do the exact same thing. So hopefully you got some good muscle memory and can just do the same thing. I do find the second panel is a little bit easier and goes faster because like you just did this, and so I think your body knows. But yeah, you're gonna do the exact same thing. The only thing that's different is that you're gonna wanna leave your yarn attached, and I'll show you what we're doing after that, because once you make your second panel, we're actually gonna keep the yarn attached and connect them and do like our crochets around the borders and stuff. So keep your yarn attached, but other than that, literally just rewind the video and make a duplicate of this exact panel. So I am going to go do that off camera, obviously, but I will be back once I have both panels done. All right, so this is my second panel. It's an exact copy of the first one we made, and I kept my yarn attached. Like I said, if you did forget and detach your yarn, that's fine. Just reattach your yarn right into that corner there, and then we're now going to attach. So I've kind of found a way to attach the panels in the most efficient way possible, or what I think is the most efficient way. If you have a better way, then feel free to leave a comment, but I think this leaves you with the fewest ends to weave in. So our yarn is here. This is my second panel. This is the first one with no yarn still attached. And this one is the new one that still has the yarn attached. And it's right here in the right-hand corner. So you want to make sure you should be ending, if you did the same thing on me, you should be ending on the corner. So if you need to flip it, then do that, but just make it look like mine. So the way I'm going to be doing it, and if you did, do yours taller, then you might have to find a different way to attach it. It doesn't matter how you do it. You might just have a little bit more ends than me to weave in, but the way I'm going to do it. So this is our active working yarn right here in this corner. What we're going to do is basically we're going to be crocheting around this armhole right here with single crochets. So start right here at the top and then crochet all the way around and come back up to here. Then we're gonna slip stitch to connect the straps right here, and then we're going to do the same thing that we did in the armhole and single crochet all the way around the neckline and end back here and then we're going to be done with this yarn and we'll have to reattach on the other side. So that's what we're going to be doing. So you're going to insert your hook into your yarn, if I can get it. There you go. And the first thing we want to do is go into the very top corner of this other panel. So I'm going to go into this last double crochet right here, right in the corner, and then grab my yarn, and I'm gonna go through that stitch, and then I'm also gonna go through the loop that I just had there. And now what we're gonna do is chain 1, and we, like I said, are gonna be single crocheting all the way around this armhole. And remember, we don't really technically have an armhole yet because it's just open, but the armhole is going to start right where we started making our decreases. So it's gonna be right here. And you can just kind of look at it to see that, but feel free to also count your rows. But you should be able to kind of line them up and see where those decreases start. So this is where the armhole is going to go to right here. So to make our single crochets, the way that I do it, since obviously we don't have actual stitches to go into since we're on the side of our crochets, the way I'm going to be doing it is I just treat every double crochet row as worth 2 single crochets, and then every single crochet is worth 1. So we are on a double crochet row, so I'm going to make 2 single crochets into the side of this row. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm just going to go right over this stitch. I'm not going into anything because honestly that just takes too long, and I think it looks just as good when you go right over it. So I'm going to go right over that with my first single crochet there, and then another one since this is a double crochet row. The next one is our single crochet row. So I'm just gonna find somewhere in there to insert my hook and make 1 single crochet. Then this is our double crochet row again. So I'm gonna do 2 like that. And then next we have a single crochet row, insert my hook in there, make 1 single crochet. And then next we have a double crochet row. So I'm gonna make 1, 2, next is single crochet, and we're just doing this all the way around. So I'll show you kind of how I do this once I get to, you know, the bottom of the armhole, so I can help you like figure out where you're supposed to stop, but I'm just doing this all the way. So I just did 2 for this double crochet row, next one's a single crochet, insert your hook wherever you can in there and make a single crochet, and you're just doing this all the way around. All right, I'm down to where we started making our decreases. So if you remember, this was the final shell row that we did, and then the next row where we did our single crochet gap row is where we made our first 2 decreases. And so that's where I'm gonna be going to. So I'm gonna go into this stitch right here. Now actually going into the actual stitch, since I don't really have to go into the side since we're decreasing down, if that makes sense. And then we are going to attach to the other side. So we're going to find that exact same stitch on the other side, which is right here. That's where we started making our decrease, since, you know, we skipped this first double crochet and the first into this gap space. So it's this one right here. And I'm going to insert my hook into there, pull up a loop, and then I'm going to make a single crochet. So that's going to count as one of our single crochets. And then next we're continuing the pattern. So that was our single crochet for that single crochet row. So we already did that one. And now we're gonna do 2 into this next double crochet row. Doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of wanna make sure you're not doing too many or too little. And, you know, keep your tension not too loose, but also not too tight that it scrunches the armhole together. Just keep it pretty loose and go with the flow. And then next we have our single crochet row right here. So just do 1 right in there, and then we have double crochet. So I'm just going right over those chains for 2, and then 1 into this single crochet row. And then we're just gonna do this all the way until we get back to where we started. And then I'm making my second single crochet in that double crochet row, and then we are back to where we started. So now we're gonna slip stitch into that very first single crochet, so this one right here. So just insert your hook right there, and slip stitch. And now, like I said, we're going to be working across the strap to connect there, and we're not going to be doing single crochets here. We're going to be doing slip stitches to just connect it. And I recommend doing these kind of loose-ish just so it doesn't squish it together too much there. You want it to be nice and straight all the way across, and so it's not bunching. So how we're going to do this is go into, it's a little bit hard to see on this first one, but you're going to go into that first double crochet there with your hook, and then you're going to go into the same one on the other side. It's a little hard since we've already crocheted into it, but just do that and then pull up a loop and then pull through all of your loops to make a slip stitch. And then for the next one, we're actually going to be going into these chains to securely connect it. So it's not like when we were just single crocheting over, you want to actually go into the chains. So our first chain is right here. You're going to just pick up that chain and then do the same thing on here. We're going to do the first chain there. It's a little harder to see, but again, it doesn't have to be perfect as long as you're not adding any extra stitches, and making sure, you know, if you're going into the first chain on this side, you have to be doing it the same on this one so it doesn't get a little bit crooked or cattywampus, for lack of a better term. So I did the first one, and now I have to do the second one of that gap space, and then go into this chain on the other side and then slip stitch. Again, try not to make it too tight. And then for this one, we're just doing the same thing with these stitches. It's going to be a little bit easier to go into them since it's the cluster of 4. And I like to just pick up one of the loops. So I'm just picking up one of the loops, not both of them, and just go into that corresponding one on the other side and slip stitch. Just picking up one loop, I think it makes it a little less bulky. But yeah, the key here is just making sure you're not like skipping over any stitches, because it's really easy to do that, especially with the chains. So just make sure you're keeping everything aligned and going into the coordinating stitch or chain on the other side, and just do this all the way across, again keeping it not too tight with your tension. And then once you make it to the end, you're going to go into that final double crochet. So just go into that final stitch. If you don't get it perfect, it literally doesn't matter. Just make sure you're going into the corresponding stitch as well, and then make a slip stitch. So we're going to be going all the way around, just kind of going around the neckline, just like we did the armholes. So we're going to be working this way. So just chain 1, because we're going to start single crocheting again, just like we did on our armhole. And the same thing applies. So 2 single crochets per double crochet row. So we're at a double crochet row right here, and you're just going to work 2 single crochets. That's our first one, 2. And then for the single crochet row, just work 1. And then we're just repeating this all the way down. So next is 1, 2, and then just 1 in this one. So it's the same thing that we just did. Does not have to be perfect. Don't go crazy over it. Just as long as you're roughly doing 1 single crochet for every single crochet row and 2 for every double crochet row, you're good. But you'll see once we get to the top here, you're no longer working into the side of stitches, so it's super easy. So I'm just gonna go, I just did my single crochet worth in this single crochet row. So the next stitch is gonna be in this actual stitch. We're actually working in the top of the stitch. So you're just gonna work 1 into every single stitch. Oops. 1 in every stitch. It's a lot easier. You don't have to guess, you know, how many you're doing per row, because we're actually working into the top of the top now. So we're just gonna do this all the way around, and then I'll show you once we get back to working into the sides, how you're gonna do that. I'm finishing working around the top, and so now we have 1 more stitch right here that I'm gonna go into, and then we're gonna start working up the side. So back to what we normally do, we have a single crochet row right here to go into, and then 2 for every double crochet, and I'm just gonna do this all the way up. And so I just made my second in this double crochet row, and we're gonna pick up this other side of the top. Make sure you're not twisting anything and keeping it like flat and correct. And then we're gonna be doing what we did on the other side. So go into the top of this other side right there, and then pull up a loop and then make a single crochet like that. And then we're going to be working 2 into this double crochet and then 1 in the single crochet, and then it's the same thing all the way around. So we're going to work into the sides of these and then go back to just working into the top of these crochets, and then we'll meet back up at the end, which is where we started. I just did my second single crochet into this last shell stitch, and that brings us back to where we started. So now, just like on the other side, we're gonna slip stitch into this first single crochet like that, and then chain 1, and we are gonna cut our yarn. And I like to leave a decent tail. And then just pull that through. To recap what we've done so far, we did this armhole, this sleeve, and the neckline. And now all we have to do is connect this sleeve, do this armhole, and then just connect down the sides of both sides. So we are gonna attach right here where we, attached just this side for the neckline. We're gonna attach our yarn right here into the top of this double crochet stitch, and then same on this side, go into the top of that last double crochet there. Make a slip knot to actually attach the yarn, and then put that on your hook. That's through both of those double crochets. Wow, I'm struggling. Put that on your hook and then tighten it down, and then pull that through both. And then I'm gonna chain 1 just to secure it. We're not doing single crochets, so this isn't like a turning chain, but just to secure it so it doesn't slip through. And now we are gonna be slip stitching through the rest of the stitches. So that's gonna count as us kind of slip stitching those first double crochets together. So now we are gonna do it for each of these chains. So just like we did on the other sleeve, just go into the chain. Again, I like to just grab 1 loop if possible, but again, it doesn't matter. And then slip stitch that, so that's the first chain. And then for the second chain, pick it up, and then same thing on the other side. And then that's a slip stitch. Again, making sure we're not doing this too loosely or too tightly or too loosely, but a little bit on the looser side if you're gonna err one way. And then, yeah, now we're doing the double crochets. So the first one is right here. So I'm just picking up a loop and then doing the same thing on this side. That's the first double crochet, and then it's just the same thing that we did on the other side. So finish this up and go all the way to the other end. I'm at the end here. I just need to do this last chain, and then the same on the other side. And that's our last slip stitch. And then just like the other side, we're doing the same armhole situation here. So just try and get all of these ends out of the way. We will deal with those at the very end, but we're gonna chain 1, and then we're gonna be working around the armhole the same way. So I'm not gonna show you because it's the exact same thing, but do the same thing where you're going down here, and then this is our last like shell stitch, and then the single crochet right before it is where you finish working down the sides, and then you connect it on this side, and then meet back up at the top. So I'll just show you how we fasten off once we do that. But it's the same thing that we did on the other side. Okay, I'm doing my last single crochet into this double crochet row. So we're done, and we're gonna slip stitch into the first single crochet we made, because we made it back around like that, and then chain 1 and cut your yarn and tighten that down. So now, like I said, we are gonna secure both sides up to the armholes. So the way I'm gonna do that is with a darning needle, actually, because I find that, as you can see, like the slip stitch obviously has a little bit of a seam, and I like this to be as least bulky as we can possibly make it. And so this is my method. So what I do is I kind of just am laying it on its side, like you can see here. So both panels are kind of meeting in the middle, and you're gonna take some yarn. I do maybe like double the length that we're sewing up, just so you have extra. It's really not that much yarn, so not a big deal, but you wanna make sure you have enough. And then cut that, so you just have a string of yarn, and put this in through your needle. So there's lots of different ways to sew up the sides, so you can use whatever stitch you want. Honestly, mine, I don't know if it's the most correct way to do it, but it works for me and I like it, so that's how I'm gonna do it. So I just have a little tail through my needle, and the way I do it is, again, we're kind of like looking at it from the front and we have our two panels meeting here. I'm gonna go into the bottom most row here. These are foundation double crochets, and I'm literally just gonna insert my hook kind of going up it. So I'm inserting through that right there, and then I'll insert back going up, if that makes sense. I'm just kind of weaving it in through that double crochet row, and then I'll just pull my yarn through like that, and then you want to make sure you leave a tail because we have to weave that in at the end since it's like not going to be secure at all. That is super important too, to securely weave these ends especially in, because it literally could just pull right through. So you would want to knot that and stuff at the end, but I do that, and then I do the same thing on this side. So I'm just going from the front and I'm literally just inserting my hook at the bottom, no particular space, just somewhere on that innermost side, and I go in and then out through the top, and then I just pull the yarn and then pull this down a little bit. And then our next row is our single crochet row. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to kind of go through one of these loops like that, and then do the same thing on this side. So it's similar to the other one where you just want to make sure you're doing the same thing and working in the corresponding rows each side so that it doesn't kind of get crooked. And okay, my camera cut out without me knowing, so I did the rest off camera, but that's literally what you're going to do the whole rest of the way up to the armpit. So just kind of weave in from the front and then come out again on the front for double crochets, and then just pick up a loop on the single crochets. So I just have this last little gap to go through. So I'm just going to kind of go through these loops here, and then same on this side, not even like fully doing it properly. I'm just trying to like close up the gap, and then I'm going to do the same over here. So just go into this loop, and then over here you're basically just sewing, and then just tighten that, and then you can even like go into maybe this one, but that's it. And so I guess we're kind of like weaving in our end prematurely here just to secure everything. You want to make sure that this does not come undone, because then the entire top would come undone basically. So just, I'm basically weaving in my end a little bit, but you would want to keep going. And then again, once we're totally done, we're going to weave in all of our ends, including this bottom one. This one's like not secure at all really, so you're going to want to make sure that gets woven in really securely. I would like knot it with this one and then weave them both in through here. But we're not quite at that stage yet, because we just have to do the same thing on this side. So you're doing exactly what we just did on this other side. So again, you would attach your yarn. Again, we're using our needle now, and just make, you know, a piece of yarn that's maybe double this length or even more if you want to be extra safe. But then just do the kind of weaving in and out, and then go to the corresponding side and do the same thing over there, and just do all the way up to here like I just showed you. And you're just going to keep doing that until you get to the end, and then do exactly what I did over here. And then at that point, your top is done. And then you would of course just weave in your ends once you get this sewn up, and then everything is completely done and your top is finished. So I'm going to do that off camera since I already showed you how to do that. But yeah, I can't wait to try it on and be done. So excited. We're almost done. So just do that and then you're good to go. Okay, sorry if it's a little windy, but thank you guys so much for watching. Again, feel free to leave any questions or anything you have to say in the comments. I love talking to you guys there. And follow me on Instagram and TikTok or wherever. Everything's in the description. And send me pictures or tag me if you post anything making this top, because I absolutely love to see it. Thank you again for watching. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.